Hey guys, today I thought we should talk about the new LULAROE documentary, The Rise and Fall of LULAROE. So this documentary was released on December 13th on Discovery Plus, and I haven't heard that much buzz about this most recent LULAROE documentary. So if you weren't already aware, I was a LULAROE consultant from 2015 to 2017. I didn't have that outrageous of an experience to be highlighted in a documentary, but I have been making a series of videos about my experience with LULAROE and answering questions and things that people have had. So I do have sort of, more insider insight into what that experience was like. Now, obviously, I can't help but compare it to LuLaRich, which was released a couple months ago on Amazon Prime. I almost wish that this documentary had come out first because it is more of a general overview of LULAROE rather than a deep dive into just one specific scandal. But this version compared LULAROE and MLMs, or multi-level marketing companies in general, to cults. It actually included Amanda Montell, who's the author of the book Cultish, and Rick Ross, who's a cult expert. So this documentary didn't follow a single storyline so much the way that LuLaRich focused more on the Washington State pyramid scheme lawsuit. And it also didn't really address a lot of the topics that I had said in a previous video were missing from LuLaRich. So go back and watch that other video of mine if you want to see some other LULAROE mysteries that I wish had been explored. One thing that this documentary did include was a former warehouse employee. He didn't really answer any of the questions that I had about, like, how do random items end up in people's boxes and how did the whole out of stock situation work, but he did show where the items had been stored outdoors, which we'll speak more about in a moment. So the whole first half of this documentary was really just a lot of background information about LULAROE before getting into some of the scandalous items, I guess, that LULAROE has come to be known for. So inventory being stored outside and becoming moldy and damaged, the tearing leggings, the print designers and the process of how they design the prints. They actually had a different designer interviewed in this film, and she explained kind of how they would make like many different versions of a single design to meet their huge quotas that they needed to meet daily for print designing. They touched briefly on overseas factories and manufacturing. It was more just a clip from one of Deanne Stidham, the founder's Instagram stories, I think, where she kind of was showing an overview of the factory floor, and she was saying like, oh, don't judge them because they work hard, that's just how it is in their culture, and like this factory is clean and has good air conditioning. So they did sort of mention, like, at the sub floor of the pyramid, even below the lowest level of consultants in a pyramid scheme, are the people doing the manufacturing of that product. So they touched on that a little bit. They also talked about race and racism within LULAROE. I'm going to discuss that more in a moment. And they also mentioned Sam Schultz and his crimes. So Sam was Deanne's nephew who was interviewed in LuLaRich. He ran events for LULAROE, and he also ended up having some legal issues of his own, so they did mention that in this film as well. So what we didn't get in this one was interviews with Mark and Deanne, the founders of LULAROE, or anyone in their family or any current LULAROE employees. So any appearances that you saw of those people were from promotional videos or training videos or social media posts. They did get an interview with Brittany Hunter, who was the very first LULAROE consultant, and some candid kind of filming from the 2021 incentive trip to Cancun. I'm not 100% sure how they got that interview with Brittany Hunter, because apparently a reporter was there to write an article for BuzzFeed, and she was actually asked not to approach or interview any of the consultants who were there. So I don't know how that worked out with Brittany getting interviewed, but most of the filming that they had from that event just seemed to be kind of hovering around as people had sort of candid conversations. So those are included in this film as well. So there were some other characters or like LuLaRoe world celebrities who did make an appearance in this documentary. One was Christina Hinks, also known as Mommy Guyver. She was a blogger who wrote about LuLaRoe, and what wasn't mentioned in her segments was that she had gotten some kind of insider information from some informant who was inside LuLaRoe, and LuLaRoe actually sued her to find out who gave her that information, and her defense was that she was technically a journalist and didn't have to divulge her sources. So that was a really interesting part of her story. I'm sure that's how she got involved in this documentary, and I was sort of surprised that they didn't mention that lawsuit. Another celebrity from the LuLaRoe world was Heather Blythley, who was interviewed briefly in this documentary. She's one of the admins and one of the detectives behind a big anti-LuLaRoe Facebook group, and I think she probably helped facilitate this documentary getting made. And then there was Elijah Tucker, who seems to be kind of the breakout star of this documentary, or the person that most people seem to be talking about from this film.
Can we get some more lights on Elijah?
So I had always thought that he had been discovered working at one of the destinations that the LuLaRoe cruise went to, or maybe as an entertainer somehow involved with the cruise. I didn't realize that he was a fellow cruise passenger who came across the LuLaRoe group and made an impression on them. I was also under the impression that he and his family had been kind of like lifted up from a bad situation by their involvement in LuLaRoe. Like LuLaRoe kind of took them in and like gave them jobs and helped them out. But it looked like they were living a pretty normal, comfortable life in North Carolina. So I guess the information that I had about him, or assumptions I had made, were incorrect. So as an African American, he said that it was really fun for him to work there at LuLaRoe because he was treated like a unicorn. But then he did kind of later concede that maybe he could have been taken advantage of. Surprisingly, at the end of the documentary, Elijah did say he would go on another LuLaRoe cruise if he were invited. And actually some of the other former consultants that they interviewed said that they have either joined or continue supporting other MLMs, some even after filing for bankruptcy due to LuLaRoe. So I guess overall that kind of shows how strong that like cult grip is. So editing wise, I just wanted to mention a couple sort of interesting things they did with the way they put this documentary together. One was that in every new scene or location that they were filming in the beginning, a pair of leggings wearing legs would sort of peek out from behind something, which is sort of creepy, but kind of a funny way to introduce each new segment. There was also lots of vertical video and things that were sort of made to look like you were watching it live on social media, even though I think a lot of it was either specifically created for this film or possibly like recreations of, live sales or different things people did. But, they'd like add little like buttons in the corner of the screen or do different things to make it look like you were watching more of a live social media post. I did notice one possible factual error when they were listing the different ranks of consultants in the company. They listed mentor and then an even higher rank of ambassador. I'd never heard of anything higher than a mentor, and it seemed to confuse other people as well. So a couple theories. One is that they might have been referring to sort of a brand ambassador program where some people who may or may not be consultants get new products early so that they can share them on social media when they launch. The other theory is that there may actually be another new higher level than mentor for retailers, but you need like 20 mentors under you, so probably nobody will ever even reach that level. But somebody I saw on Facebook did mention that maybe there might actually be this new higher level that was recently announced. I know that this documentary was probably being edited down to almost the last minute because I know there were calls on Facebook for people to submit different kinds of content. You know, we need a video of somebody doing this. Can you film a video of like burning your new consultant kit? That sort of thing. And actually I was reached out to by I guess one of the producers of the film who was asking for photos or video that I might have had from certain events. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to provide it within their deadline. It was a really short turnaround time, and I also wasn't really comfortable with the requirements in the release form, so I didn't submit anything that was included in this film. So as far as my final thoughts, of course, I wish that this had been more in depth, but again, that would just be a huge undertaking. I understand that with these types of documentaries, they kind of just have to pick a storyline and go with it. This one, like I said, was really a higher level overview and just touched briefly on a lot of different issues that LULAROE has faced, such as the inventory being stored outside. So I wonder if people who are less familiar or totally unfamiliar with LULAROE really caught on to like this litany of issues that they've been experiencing, or maybe they heard a mention of something that interested them and maybe they go on to do their own research and find out in more detail what that was about. But overall, this was a really good overview of LULAROE and MLMs in general. They did seem to be going with the cult angle, and I think they could have done more to structure it around some of those cult tactics. I feel like I've actually learned more about terminology and methods that are used by both cults and MLMs, which are commercial cults, from podcasts and other sources that are out right now. So I do feel like they could have kind of tied that more together. But overall, the documentary shed light on a couple of new areas that I wasn't personally familiar with, but I am still waiting on answers to some of the questions that I had even following Lula Rich. So if you saw this documentary, what did you think about it? What other LULAROE questions do you have? I am happy to have a conversation in the comments, and I've been making this series about my personal experience with LULAROE, so I'm happy to add on to that as well to address some other questions that come up following these documentaries. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.